The latest Evercade game of the month is here, and it is Nyghtmare the Ninth King, which is an indie game from Elvies. This game will be available as part of the Indie Heroes collection for when it launches next February, and is an indie Game Boy Color game which has vibes of Castlevania. This is another short but sweet game which will entertain you for an hour or two and will scratch the itch of fans of the genre. Without further ado, let's check out Nyghtmare the Ninth King. The story of the game is somewhat confusing. I've played through the game twice and I just kind of didn't take it in, so have had to go to the website for clarification. Apparently there is some forgotten kingdom and it has reappeared out of nowhere, and there are undead monsters and zombies and such like, and in the game you play as one of two characters, Aryn, if that is how it's pronounced, or Blizz, and you go about 6 stages where you must get to the end of the stage without getting killed by various monsters or falling down into pits. At the end of each stage there is a boss fight, and I imagine most people will see the credits within an hour. There are some story scenes and even at least one point where you can choose dialogue, which I'm guessing may change the story. I think there are maybe different routes or different ending which may add replay value, and the game does have some replay value regardless, as playing as the two different characters actually makes for a fairly different experience. I played it first as Aryn, and for me this was a mistake. The characters have some unique moves, and Blizz in my opinion gets the better deal here. Both characters have short range attacks. Aryn can use a Castlevania style whip, and Blizz has a sword, maybe? A spear? I'm not sure. I'll be honest, I couldn't make out what the graphics were a lot of the time, but we'll have more on the graphics later. Aryn also has a projectile weapon which Blizz doesn't, and whilst this is super handy for Aryn, you are limited to how much ammo you have. So these projectiles are best collected throughout the levels and saved for each boss fight. After this, I think Blizz is the better character to play as. Whilst not having a projectile initially made me think he'd be the worst character, his exclusive moves are much better. Aryn can do a slide move, but this will just scoot her along the ground, and it is handy for zipping under bosses that jump, but Blizz has a dash move. On the face of it they seem similar, but you can also take this dash move to the air. So you can jump up and dash mid-air, whereas Aryn can only slide across the ground. This kind of works a bit like a double jump, but gives you extra length to the jump rather than more height. This does make dealing with most situations in the game a lot better than when I played as Aryn. Blizz also has the ability to fully heal, rather than have a projectile weapon. This uses the ammo, or whatever the magic or pickup that you get along the way is, but because it is so plentiful, it meant that the boss fights were very, very easy, as you could just stand next to them and keep stabbing with your sword. I mean, sure, you would absorb a lot of damage, but you could easily just heal yourself back to full energy and do this on every single boss fight. So it made beating them quite a breeze. Now, I do feel Blizz was slightly overpowered in this sense, but I also didn't mind his dash and healing, as I found some aspects of playing as Aryn a little bit frustrating. The level design is okay and mostly inoffensive, but felt like you could fall into pits a little too easily, especially if you accidentally press the dash and then just find yourself zipping into the pit without a way to jump and stop yourself from falling. I also didn't like that if an enemy hits you, you will be knocked back a little bit, and often this can just knock you into a pit and you'll lose a life. Often with levels you'll be sent back to the start, but sometimes you do have a restart checkpoint of sorts, but exactly where these were or how you activate them wasn't super clear to me. And that brings me on to the graphics. I think the idea is that Aryn is wearing a hood, but she does look like a walking banana, which I'm sure you won't be able to unsee now. A lot of the enemies kind of just look like blobs or shapes, but some you can tell as being more humanoid or animal-like. Blizz, I think, is meant to be a knight. Maybe this would be better played on the EXP or a smaller handheld like the Game Boy Color it was designed for. On my TV on the Evercade VS, I just thought things were a bit unclear as what the designs often were. The music is serviceable, although there are sometimes moments or rooms where you just go in there and there is no music and it just stops, and I'm not sure why. Now, my favourite thing about the game is that each character does have a different feel, and this is also reflected in the story. It's not just a character swap and the exact same thing. It even gave me the vibe of when I played Resident Evil 2, in that you get to see the story from another angle. When I first played this as Aryn, I hadn't realised that one of the boss characters was actually a fight against Blizz, until that is, I played as Blizz and realised that he fought Aryn as a boss. I don't think this will be one that I will rush to play too often, as whilst it's easy enough, some of the cheap deaths were annoying. That said, I'm sure if this is your cup of tea, if you like that Castlevania kind of vibe, there is plenty to like for an indie title. I think there are a bunch more areas that I hadn't explored. The game does let you explore some areas to a degree, but rarely lets you backtrack to places you've already been. I did find one area as Aryn where effectively you could get infinite lives by recollecting the same one-up item over and over. Or at least you could if the game didn't limit you to a maximum of 5 lives. After that, the one-up just became a health pickup. I know this is the final game, but I'd like to see it developed further. I think maybe a new game plus mode or an unlockable third character that gave you all the moves from both characters would be great, and make the game more enjoyable, as Blizz's dash and heal moves and Aryn's projectile combined would make this the most fun way to play, even if it did make it even easier. As always, of any of my reviews of an Evercade Game of the Month game, this review will be relevant about the game whether you play it during its 1 month where it is available to download on the Evercade VS or EXP, or later as part of the Indie Heroes Collection 4 cartridge. Or you could also get it from itch.io to play on your PC or whatever you play Game Boy ROMs on, or you can get a physical cartridge of the game to play on your Game Boy Color as well. I did find that there was a little bit of slowdown where there was lots of enemies on the screen at once, and that was a shame, and there were a couple of other glitches or design choices that I think need to be cleaned up. There's a floating blob enemy thing that as soon as you kill it, it just respawns, and this makes it pointless to kill as it means you always have an enemy in front of you. Also, there is a boss that seems to glitch in front of you even if you change the direction to dodge it. I can't believe this was quite intended, as it just comes off as unfair rather than it being intended as an ability of the boss. And when I beat the final boss as Aryn, I could still move about even though it seemed like an end cutscene was beginning. I did notice that there was a Blaze logo at the start of the game, which honestly I don't think normally happens on Evercade games. So I guess the ROM has been updated to include that, and that was neat. If you're playing this on a Game Boy or on another device as a standalone experience, I think it's short and simple and it won't blow your mind, but it's fun for an hour. But I do think it is better suited as part of a collection in the upcoming Indie Heroes 4. As things stand so far, I think this is overall a better game than last month's Block'em Sock'em, and it wasn't as good as the Curse of Ilmore Bay. So far, I think Indie Heroes 4 is shaping up with games that are on par with some of the titles we've previously had in the Indie Heroes collection, but that we haven't had a heavy hitter release yet out of the 3 games put out each month so far. In both previous years where we've had the Game of the Month program, I felt that the best games were the first few to release, so maybe Blizz have mixed things up and started it with some okay to decent titles and have saved some of the better games for a few months in, so it doesn't feel like things start to taper off and fizzle out. So that's going to wrap things up for this review of Nyghtmare the Ninth King on the Evercade. You can also get this, of course, from itch.io to play on your PC, and you can get a physical Game Boy cartridge if that's what floats your boat. I would really appreciate if you would smash that subscribe button here on the Geek Battle Gaming YouTube channel, and do check out all of the Evercade coverage that I've got on the channel so far, because I've also got a bunch more coming up in the not too distant future, and of course I'll be back next month to see what the next game of the month is. And of course, you can also go to www.xstreamed.tv/gaming to check out all of the written article versions of any of the videos on the channel. So with that, until next time, stay safe, always stay extremed, and ciao for now. Boom. And we're off the air.